The Umkhonto WeSizwe Party is demanding the immediate withdrawal or the suspension of its members of parliament from the MPs from the KwaZulu-Natal legislature. 34 MKP members have been suspended after violent disruption of a sitting during a no-confidence motion against Premier Thami Ntuli, which he survived. Members wanted a secret ballot for the no-confidence motion. The party has written to Speaker Nkateko Mabasa through its lawyers, arguing that the suspension is unlawful and irrational. It issued an ultimatum to withdraw the suspension before 31 December or face legal action.
She could have just called the leaders of the various political parties, party leaders and the chief whip, and requested them to please, step aside, let's have a discussion and resolve this issue. She never did that. She went on to by default, to call the police. Now, the police arrive there. Secondly, there's no mace. So the sitting itself is not duly constituted. The police arrived there with live rounds. That decision by her to call the police, by the way, is also illegal because there was no threat. By virtue of her calling the police, that is what led to the disorderly outcomes of that actual sitting. Because at that point in time, this was an issue that could have been held and discussed without involving the police. But unfortunately, the speaker, in her arrogance and not wanting to resolve this issue constitutionally, just decided on that. Now, for her to come to a point of saying that she's suspending our members, she can't just go and suspend our members. There are rules that you have to follow. And it's well set out from Rule 61 right up to Rule 66 that states clearly what processes you need to follow. One of those being you have to call out the member's name, at least 3 times prior to you removing them.
The push by the Umkhonto WeSizwe Party to take control of KwaZulu-Natal is driven by a mix of electoral dominance, historical grievances and a strategic attempt to dismantle the current governing coalition. The primary driver is the MKP's belief that they are the rightful governors of the province. In the 2024 general elections, the MKP secured approximately 45% of the vote in KZN, winning 37 out of 80 seats. Now, despite being the largest party, they were excluded from power when the ANC, IFP, DA and NFP formed a government of provincial unity to block them. Let's chat more with political analyst Nkateko Mabasa. Nkateko, I appreciate your time. Now, is the MK trying to collapse the coalition, force floor crossing, realignment, paralyze governance through committees and budgets, or trigger fresh elections? What is it exactly that they're trying to do?
Well, I think at this point, the MK needs something to show for their what you might call an electoral majority. Since coming into the scene and becoming the 3rd largest party in the country and also the largest party in KZN, they really haven't shown anything for it. There hasn't been anything that you would say they have achieved substantially, especially for their electorate. So this was, an attempt to show that they can, use their power to achieve something. Unfortunately, it failed. They are seen as enemy number 1 by all the other parties. All the other parties have banded against them. And they're at a point where, with all the internal fights that they have, there really hasn't been anything that, you can say this is what the MK has achieved so far.
So speaking of failure, the no-confidence motion failed on December 15, but the drama didn't end there. What did that vote reveal about MK's current strategy and its limits?
Well, I think it just shows that, short-term strategy has, long-term consequences. They came into the scene 6 months before election. They surprised everyone. They got a lot of votes. But in the long term, it seems like it wasn't a good strategy. They antagonized all the other political parties. In politics, you need to make friends. You need to be able to draw people in and convince them of your arguments. But that shock from the 2024 election still carries on. and a lot of the parties are still antagonized by the MK. I assume anything that the MK comes up with will be voted against. It doesn't seem like they will make a lot of friends either in the National Assembly, even in the KZN provincial legislature. They have 37 seats. That should be able to make them do quite a lot, because you need just 41 seats to take over the legislature, but they couldn't win 3 votes for them to be able to take over.
Now, violence and disorder in the House, clip that we watched moments ago, are we seeing a deliberate tactic of disruption to delegitimize the Speaker and process, or is it a loss of control?
I think at this moment they're just trying any and every tactic to be able to take control, whether it's delegitimizing the Speaker, as you say, whether it's trying to convince the EFF to vote with them, and even convince the IFP, which failed, to vote with them. It's really a desperate attempt. We are a couple of months away from the local elections. They also need some sort of a cash cow to fund the campaign. I imagine them taking over KZN would allow them to have some form of financial resource. Campaigns take a lot of money. So I think at this point, they're just trying any and everything in order to take over power. As I said, the shock of them arriving into the political scene gained them the votes that they needed. But in the long term, it seems like it wasn't a good strategy.
So speaking of strategy, the 2026 local government elections, as you indicate, are potentially 12 months away on the top end. What sort of strategies do they need to employ, and what lessons have they learned since last year, or since since they won those seats several months ago?
Well, I think it's hard to say at this point, because if you analyze how they won, it was basically taking over the ANC branches. They took over also EFF branches as well. I don't think they'll be able to do that again, do a repeat of that. But I mean, it's safe to say the popularity of Jacob Zuma is still high. So he will canvass and go all over the province, go all over the country to garner those votes. But I think all the other parties are watchful and defensive of working with the MK, because if you work with them, you might end up the biggest loser after election. They might take over your branches. So it's tough to say what really is their strategy. Surprising people 6 months before election only works once. And the way they did it really antagonized all the other political parties. And that's what we see in the KZN legislature. I mean, they in an ordinary situation, they should be able to convince the IFP. They should be able to work with some in the ANC as well. But their short-term strategy is really hitting them hard in the long term. And also, they are going through a lot of internal strife. There's a lot of defection and resignations and all sorts of issues. So 6 months or a year into ahead of the local elections, they really need to show themselves that they're a strong, dependable, sustainable party, which they have not at this point. And them winning the KZN legislature would give them that prestige and that platform to show that they can deliver something. Even their court cases that they've been involved in have all failed. They tried to stop the Madlanga Commission. They tried to stop the suspension of Sezom Chunu and various other court cases which have not bared any fruits for them. So it's not looking good for them. But as I said, the popularity of Jacob Zuma is still high. So he might, tune up the election campaign for them to get the votes that they need. But in politics, you need friends, and they are not making any friends right now.
Nkateko, so we've talked about Jacob Zuma. You've certainly mentioned that he still has a huge amount of influence. He's still a powerful individual, and he has the ability to garner the troops, if you will, outside of his own movement to support the MK political party. But let's talk about his power within the party itself. I mean, you've talked about fractious interventions, issues going on where there's despondency, people are pulling out, internal fighting and so on. Does he still have a grip? Has he ever had a grip on the party itself?
That is undeniable. He still has a huge grip on the party. That's one of the reasons why you have people like your Floyd leaving and starting their own party. And there was that moment where they kicked out the chief whip in Parliament, and that decision was reversed. So he still has a huge grip on the party. I think the big question is what will happen on the ground ahead of the election. Elections are a branch contestation. The more branches or healthy branches you have, the more likelihood you are to win an election. As I said, their strategy was to take over ANC branches, was to take over EFF branches. Will they be able to do that again is highly unlikely. And also their own branches on the ground. Are they functional? Are they getting more members? Are they still working as smoothly? I think that's still to be seen. But it's undeniable. It's still Jacob Zuma's party. He calls the shots. If you don't align with Jacob Zuma, you won't last in the party. But elections, as I said, it's all about branches and how many branches you have. And how many of those branches are working the ground. That's yet to be seen on, MK. Have they been able to sustain those branches which they took over? Have they been able to grow them? And what really is the health of MK branches ahead of the local elections?
Now, looking at coalition durability, what should we watch out for in January to March 2026 that signals that the GPU is maybe weakening? We're looking at committee control, we're looking at by-elections, cabinet reshuffles, public service disruptions maybe? definitely, there will be a lot of that. There will be a lot of all types of tactics used to delegitimize the GPU. Already the MK has started saying that the KZN is collapsing not because of the problems, but because of the GPU and the Premier Thami Ntuli. So there will be a lot of protests. There will be a lot of court cases ahead of the elections. So we're going to see a lot of disruptions, and we're going to see a lot of attempts to grab the national headlines to get as much media space as possible. It's going to be a very hotly contested elections. Everyone is expecting the decline of the ANC to continue. So it's really up for the picking for any political party who can put themselves in front of the electorate and say they are available, they are capable, they are better than the previous administration. With the GPU itself, they will try to hold on as much as they can to keep the MK away. I think they are really afraid of seizing power to the MK in KZN. But every party has to look after themselves. So there will also be a lot of internal contestation within the GPU, ANC against the DA, against the IFP and the NFP and EFF as well. So they will try to hold on as a GPU while at the same time contesting against each other.
but I think they have a bigger goal in mind, and that is to keep the MK out. How long they're going to be able to do that is yet to be seen. I think, there's a trend in South Africa that parties usually do well on the first elections and then they decline after that. I think everyone is, maybe expecting the same with the MK, that maybe the last election was their best election. But, we don't know how that will turn out with the way that the ANC is declining. So it's really yet to be seen. But, it's going to be a hotly contested elections in 2026.
Certainly a lot to look out for. Political analyst Nkateko Mabasa talking to us about the MK party's push to take control of KwaZulu-Natal.